Chapter 12: Challenging the Giant. In the mid-'80s, the Canadian market was virtually saturated for many Canadian retailers. Everyone, including our company, was under pressure to expand and continue growing. Expanding to the United States seemed to be an obvious option. Although this was also true for other retail sectors in Canada, for the purpose of this discussion, I am speaking here only about the retail fashion industry. Many of us in the industry surmised that the United States represented a large, lucrative market, and we believed we could take the US by storm. So a number of top Canadian fashion retailers, including Shermax, ventured south. Almost without exception, all of us were terribly beaten up. In one way or another, most of us managed to extricate ourselves from our U.S. adventures after taking a financial bath, and we limped home to our safe Canadian retail environment to hide from the retail sharks south of the border. In our case, we had been studying our would-be American competitors in the maternity business for a long time, and in our arrogance, we were convinced that we were better than they were. So in 1986, we put together an ambitious expansion plan for our maternity division into the U.S. We started with 8 stores, all at the same time. 1 in Paramus, New Jersey, 3 in Washington, Georgetown area, 1 in Chicago, 1 in Buffalo, 1 in Richmond, Virginia, and 1 in Boston. We felt we needed to establish a presence in the U.S. as quickly as possible, and to that end we took pretty well what we could get in terms of store locations. Because we were from outside the country, the landlords insisted on special guarantees and 10-year leases. Consequently, moving into the U.S. involved a substantial long-term commitment. We opened our first store in Paramus in June and our second store in Tysons Corner in Washington in August, 2 of the top retail malls in the U.S. From the outset, we did not know what hit us. It seemed as though we had scored a home run. July, August, and September were great months, and those 2 stores immediately became the top 2 stores in our entire chain. However, in November, December, and January, the bottom fell out. Customers flocked to our store in the first 3 months, but after that, it was as if we had become invisible. We never recovered. We could not figure out what had happened. Why did we do so well in those 2 stores in the beginning, and why did the bottom fall out after 3 months? In the meantime, we opened the other 6 stores in centers that were not as good as those in Paramus and Tysons Corner, and none of them ever really took off. Instead of generating profits, the U.S. division recorded losses. We kept operating there for about 3 years, and that small division became a significant drain on our finances and other resources. So there we were with an albatross around our neck, expensive leases for another 7 or 8 years, with the prospect of it being a continuous drain for that period. We were looking into a black hole. Enter my guardian angel. In 1990, Mike Kershaw was a president of Shermax at the time and was touring our U.S. stores, walked into one of our main competitor stores, a maternity operation called Mother's Works. By coincidence, one of their senior executives was visiting that store at the same time. Mike introduced himself, and in the course of the conversation that followed, Mike suggested that they consider buying our U.S. operation. I would not have had the nerve to ask anyone to do that. In fact, I would have been thrilled to pay just to get rid of them, especially in light of our long-term leases. But Mike had more chutzpah than I did, and before we knew it, we had sold our U.S. stores for something in the neighborhood of $1.5 million. Not only did this stop the hemorrhaging, we recovered some of our accumulated losses and we bowed out gracefully. Thank you, guardian angel. Almost all of the other Canadian fashion retailers who ventured south met with the same fate. Of course, there were questions around our industry. What happened? Why couldn't we compete? What was missing? After my own adventure, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out just what caused this result. Why could we not compete? Eventually, I came up with what I believe is the answer. The fundamental reason was that we Canadian retailers were what I call hope retailers. By that I mean we put beautiful merchandise into beautiful stores and hope that it would sell. However, American retailers, our competitors, were and are what I call push retailers. They put beautiful merchandise into beautiful stores and they push the hell out of it, promotion after promotion after promotion, until they push it out of their stores. The key to their strategy is that their promotions are not just about clearing out merchandise. They plan and buy into those promotions. They buy with the appropriate margins to be able to promote and still be profitable. On the other hand, we put beautiful merchandise into beautiful stores and presented it beautifully, and we did very well at the beginning of the season. But when the American retailers started promoting, we did not promote. We maintained the integrity of our merchandise and our stores. Meanwhile, the customers were being attracted elsewhere by promotions. The fact is, we were not nearly as good retailers as we thought we were, and the U.S. retailers were far better than we gave them credit for. They were accustomed to dealing with intense competition, and they knew how to survive and prosper in a retail jungle. Also, they had the experience of 2 and 3 generations of retailing and the size and the economies of scale that made it no contest. We were much smaller and we had no comparable experience. In comparison, we were like babes in the woods. We had been successful in our safe Canadian retail environment, but we could not compete in the US market, and we came back to Canada to hide. However, as things turned out, there was nowhere to hide because the US retailers followed us home. In the 1990s, there was a huge influx of U.S. retailers into Canadian retail market, but they did not meet the same fate as we did going into their market. Instead, they brought their strategies to Canada and they now dominate the Canadian retail landscape. Canadian retailers no longer have a place to hide. In the last decade, there has been a bloodbath among Canadian retailers. Canadian retail giants such as Woolworths, Eaton's, Simpsons, Dilex with all its divisions, the original Dalmies, Penningtons, and Pascal Hardware, to name just a few, are all gone. Those who survived had to learn and learn fast how to compete with the retail sharks from south of the border and had to raise dramatically their level of retailing savvy and sophistication. As a result, the disparity between U.S. and Canadian retailers no longer exists to the same extent. Most Canadian retailers that survived and went on to prosper are now acknowledged as outstanding retailers, but I still wonder about their ability to compete successfully in the United States. Only time will tell.